It was just supposed to be a quiet Saturday. You know, one of those rare weekends where you're not running errands, fixing something around the house, or fielding endless work emails. I wanted peace, solitude. So I grabbed my old fishing rod, a cold bottle of water, and headed out to the neighborhood pond. Now, this wasn't some public lake with lifeguards and paddle boats. It was a small, tucked-away pond in the center of our gated community, clean, calm, and perfectly still. Surrounded by willows and birdsong, it was my personal little escape. No signs, no warnings, no fishing notices, just nature. I'd fished there a few times over the last year. Nothing major, just casting for bluegill, maybe the odd bass, catch and release. I wasn't selling anything or hauling buckets of fish home. It was peaceful, therapeutic. Heck, I even picked up trash around the pond sometimes. Felt like I was helping the place stay clean, but that morning was different. I had barely cast my line when I saw the golf cart. It was white, humming softly, cutting through the path like it owned the place. Inside was a man I'd only seen in passing. Gray beard, sunglasses, blue HOA badge. Pinned to his polo shirt like he was some kind of mall cop. He pulled up right behind me and cleared his throat. Loud. "You know fishing is prohibited here, right?" he asked. Not so much a question as a challenge. I turned around, confused. "Really? Since when?" He didn't smile. "Always has been. It's in the HOA bylaws." I shrugged, glancing around. There's no sign. Doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't an excuse. You'll be receiving a citation. A citation? For fishing? I thought he was joking. I actually chuckled at first, which didn't help. His expression didn't change. That's when I realized he was serious. Dead serious. He drove off without another word. I stood there with my rod in hand, fishless, confused, and suddenly boiling with frustration. Why would they fine someone for fishing in a neighborhood pond with no signs, no warnings, and no disturbances? Was it really about the rules? Or was it something else? As I packed up and walked home, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wanted answers, and I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go. The next morning I found a letter taped to my front door. Not in an envelope, not in the mailbox, taped, right in the center of the door like a warning sign. The letterhead was unmistakable. Our Homeowners Association, bold and corporate. I opened it, expecting a warning. Instead, it was a formal citation. Unauthorized use of community property, $250 fine, due in 15 days. $250. For fishing. I stared at the paper, disbelief slowly giving way to anger. I wasn't damaging property. I wasn't throwing parties. I was fishing, quietly, alone, with zero harm done. But that wasn't even the part that got me. At the bottom, in small print, was a note. Repeat violations may result in legal action or restriction of community privileges. Legal action? For fishing? I sat down with a cup of coffee, the letter spread out on the table, and started doing something I hadn't done before. I read the entire HOA handbook, the bylaws, the rules, the fine print. 43 pages of regulations written in that passive-aggressive legalese no one reads. And guess what? There was nothing in it that mentioned fishing. Not a word. No section. No subsection. Nothing. Now I was suspicious. If it wasn't in the rules, how could they fine me? I called the HOA office and no one picked up. I emailed, no response. So I decided to go to the source. That same afternoon, I went to the monthly HOA meeting. They didn't expect me. The room was half empty. A few retirees sipping lukewarm coffee. A whiteboard with bullet points. The guy from the golf cart was there, sitting at the head of the table like he ran the whole place. I asked one simple question. Where exactly does it say that fishing is prohibited? They didn't answer right away. One board member shuffled through some papers. Another cleared her throat. Finally, golf cart guy said, "It's an understood rule. We have to protect the pond's ecosystem." I raised an eyebrow. An understood rule isn't a written one. He didn't like that. The meeting got tense. Voices were raised. I didn't back down. I wasn't trying to be confrontational. I just wanted answers. But I could tell something wasn't right. This wasn't about fishing anymore. This was about control, and if they thought I was going to quietly pay that fine and walk away, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next week, things got weird. Neighbors I'd waved to for years suddenly stopped making eye contact. One woman crossed the street when she saw me walking. Kids who used to ride their bikes past my driveway now looped around the block. It felt like I was being watched, or worse, talked about. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe I was just being sensitive after the HOA drama. But then I overheard it. I was walking past the mailboxes when two men were chatting quietly. Nearby. Yeah, he's the one they're trying to find. Seriously? For fishing? No, it's not just that. I heard he's been poking around too much, asking questions. That stopped me cold. What questions? What were they hearing? I stepped around the corner and they instantly went quiet. Gave me stiff nods and walked off. Now I was really curious, so I went back online, started looking into the HOA board, who ran it, how long they'd been in charge, and something odd popped up. Almost all current board members had been on it for over 12 years. That's unusual for any neighborhood board. Usually people rotate, they step down, but not here. Same names, same faces, same control. I reached out to a guy named Chris. He'd moved out of the neighborhood 3 years ago. Found him through a local Facebook group. I asked him about the HOA. His response? Be careful, man. They don't like people digging. Trust. Me? I asked him to elaborate, but he left me on red. What was going on in this neighborhood? And why did something as harmless as fishing start unraveling a web that no one wanted to talk about? I was about to find out. After getting ghosted by Chris, I started wondering, what were they hiding? I went back to the HOA bylaws, thinking maybe I missed something. It was late, the house was quiet, and I had nothing but a cup of reheated coffee and a growing obsession. Page. By page, I went over everything. And then, on page 39, there it was, a footnote in a section titled Environmental Preservation Guidelines. It said, water sources within community grounds are not to be used for recreational purposes, as determined by the board. Wait, as determined by the board. So basically, they made a rule that gave themselves the power to make more rules, whenever they wanted, without notifying residents. That didn't sit right. It felt like a loophole big enough to drive a truck through. The next day, I filed a formal dispute against the citation. I printed out the page, highlighted the vague wording, included screenshots of the community site showing no posted rules about the pond, and I dropped it off at the HOA office, along with a letter demanding the fine be revoked. A week went by. No response. Until a notice arrived. This time, it was more than a fine. It was a warning of escalating action. The HOA claimed I was violating community standards, disturbing board meetings, and interfering with board operations. If I didn't comply, they'd seek legal enforcement, possibly even liens against my property. This was no longer about fishing. They were trying to silence me, but instead of backing down, I decided to fight fire with fire. Just as I was drafting a complaint to the state HOA regulatory board, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no note, just a flash drive. Now this felt like a movie, but my gut told me it was real. I plugged it into my laptop and waited. Inside was a single folder labeled Pondgate. Inside that, photos, PDFs, meeting recordings, stuff the HOA clearly didn't want out. One file was a scanned document, dated 2 years ago, proposing that the pond area be converted into exclusive use property, meaning they wanted to eventually fence it off and claim it as private land for approved members only. Another file showed board meeting notes, off the books, discussing how to increase HOA fees without triggering a community vote. That was illegal. But the real kicker? An audio file. You could hear the same guy who cited me, Mr. Golf Cart, saying, "If we let residents do what they want around the pond, next thing you know they'll want to fish, swim, bring guests, and we'll lose control." There it was, control. The entire fishing fine was a test, a power play. They wanted to see if I'd roll over like everyone else had for years. But now, I had proof, and I had a plan. I decided to go public. I started small, printed flyers with snippets of the documents and the line, "Do you really know what your HOA is doing?" I slid them under doors, posted them near the mailbox station, and uploaded the audio file anonymously to the community Facebook group. Within hours, it blew up. People were commenting like crazy. "What the hell? They've been lying to us?" I always wondered why we couldn't even walk our dogs near the pond. Some people defended the board, others were furious, but most were just shocked. A day later, the board issued a public statement saying the files were inaccurate and taken out of context. Classic. So I hosted a community meeting in my driveway, printed out copies of everything, played the full audio. Neighbors showed up, chairs, beers, kids running around. It was casual, but people listened, and more importantly, people started asking their own questions. That night, I didn't feel alone anymore. And the board? They knew the tide was turning. It didn't take long for the board to strike back. 2 days after my driveway meeting, I woke up to find a violation notice in my mailbox. Not for fishing. This time, it was for unauthorized gathering on my property. They claimed my little neighborhood meetup was a violation of HOA policy. Really? Next came a letter about the color of my trash bins. Apparently they weren't in line with the community aesthetic. Then they said my lawn was half an inch too long, half an inch. It was petty, targeted, and deliberate, but it backfired. Neighbors started noticing the same thing. One by one, people were getting flagged for tiny infractions. Mailboxes an inch too high, parked cars too close to the curb, garden flags, not HOA approved. The board wasn't just punishing me anymore. They were punishing everyone who asked questions. And that was the mistake. Because now, the whole neighborhood was awake. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. People packed into the small community hall, clipboards in hand, arms crossed, jaws tight. Even folks who'd never cared before were suddenly very interested in HOA politics. This time, I wasn't the one asking questions. They were. Where exactly are the records of how dues are spent? Who approved the new pond restrictions? Why haven't board members changed in over a decade? The board stumbled through answers, dodged others, and at times just sat there, in awkward silence. And then someone made the motion that changed everything. I propose we initiate a vote to remove the current board and hold open elections. It was like throwing a match into gasoline. People cheered. The board tried to shut it down, claiming the motion was out of order. But several residents, including a retired lawyer, stood up with a copy of the HOA charter and proved them wrong. That night we got the signatures we needed. Change was coming. In the weeks that followed, the shift was undeniable. 3 board members resigned before the election could even be held. Rumors flew, something about quiet investigations, maybe even misused funds. I never confirmed it, but I didn't need to. The vote happened. New people got elected. Real neighbors. People who lived here, who cared. Who remembered what a community was supposed to be. The first thing they did, they threw out all those old, interpretive rules. Next, they revoked all unjust fines, including mine. And finally, they posted clear signage around the pond, not to ban fishing, but to say, catch and release fishing welcome. Respect the wildlife. Respect each other. Imagine that. It's funny how something so small, just a simple fishing trip, can unravel something much bigger. I never set out to be a troublemaker. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I just wanted some peace, some quiet, a little time with nature. But when people try to control what's not theirs, when they use rules as weapons instead of guidelines, that's when things fall apart. And sometimes, you gotta cast a line just to stir the water. Now, every Saturday, I go back to that same pond, same rod, same bottle of water. Only difference? Now, I'm not alone. I see kids learning to cast, parents sitting on benches, friends sharing stories. The pond is finally part of the community again. And every time I toss that line in, I smile, because they tried to find me for fishing. Instead, they woke up the whole neighborhood.